Welcome to the results and review of UFC Fight Night 110, Lewis versus Hunt. This was taking place in Auckland. What a huge card. Some really interesting fights. We're going to start with the main event. My prediction was that the Black Beast was going to win via TKO. That didn't happen. Mark Hunt won by a referee stoppage. This went into the fourth round. I didn't expect it to go into the fourth round. Lewis started off the first round, let's say, in a giddy kind of fashion. He scored two big head kicks. He was throwing flying knees. Obviously, as you'd expect, it was quite tentative early on with a few explosions. At the end of the first round, Hunt had a cut on his leg from checking a kick and a cut on his forehead from eating a shot. The second round, Derek Lewis scored a flying knee, of all things. I never thought I would say that. There was an eye poke to Mark Hunt, and I think the referee, Mark Goddard, handled it really well. He separated the fighters, he explained the rules, he talked to Mark Hunt, brought in the ringside doctor, asked the doctor if there was any damage. Brought them back together, and I thought, that's the right way to handle it. Hunt landed some big shots to close out round two. I think the first and second round are very difficult to score. Maybe you could give it to Lewis, maybe you could give it to Hunt. But the third round, Hunt really turned it up. And then, Lewis looked really tired towards the end. Round four, again, pretty even. Hunt stalking Lewis around the cage, though. Lewis eating some massive shots, both guys eating big shots. And finally, after one too many shots, Mark Goddard stepped in, and we have Mark Hunt winning yet again. And I mean, what can you say about Mark Hunt? This guy just refuses to go away, so Mark Hunt will be back in the title picture. Then we move down to the co-main event, Dan Kelly versus Derek Brunson. So I picked Dan Kelly, and of course he didn't win this one. Derek Brunson very early in the first round. How long was this? This was maybe like a minute into the first round, and he just landed this huge left hand. Maybe not the first shot, but one of the first shots, clean on the jaw of Kelly. Kelly went out. Boom. There's not much to be said about it. It was an amazing shot. I don't know what's going to happen with Kelly now. Maybe it's time for him to retire, and Brunson can move up. Brunson called out Antonio Carlos Jr. after the fight. I like that match. I think that's a good matchup. It'll certainly help establish some order in the division a little bit lower down in the top 10. Then we had Dan Hooker against Ross Pearson. And finally, I actually get a decision right. So the first round was pretty good. It's very technical in terms of striking, and that's not something I can say about most of this card. Hooker's reach allowed him to score big with kicks, and I think you can see both of these guys are really good quality MMA fighters, very professional. The second round, Hooker was scoring with his jab. Pearson was hitting back with leaping left hooks, and on one of these exchanges, Hooker raised his, I believe, right knee, perfectly timed onto the jaw, and like we've seen quite often recently, knee to the face wins a fight. It's becoming one of the most popular moves in MMA. There's not much to be said about it. Then we had Frankenstein against the Hulk. So Luis Enrique de Silva is Frankenstein, Ion Cutelaba is the Hulk. This was pretty quick. The first round left hook from the Hulk, and then he just stood over Frankenstein and dropped bombs on him. That was 20 seconds, 20-second victory. Hulk looked good, you know. You can't knock it out. You can't blame the Silva, I think, here. It was a case of whoever was going to land first would do well, and it was Hulk that landed first. And my run of amazing predictions continues as Tim Elliott faced off against Ben Ungen. So I picked Tim Elliott via points, and of course Ungen won by rear naked choke early in the first round. I think that was about 3 minutes that one lasted. No, sorry, that one lasted 50 seconds. But basically, Elliott takes him down, and Ungen rolls through it. Beautiful. You know, I would recommend going to watch that. You know, you can probably get the highlights of this show into some really nice GIFs. But yeah, Ungen really surprised me. He rolled through beautifully, got the rear naked choke. Easy as you like win. Then when we go back a little bit further on the card, we had Volkanovski taking on Hereafter. Let me get his name right. Mizuta Hereafter. Yeah, so actually I picked this one for Volkanovski by TKO. He won by decision, 30-27 across the board. First round, Volkanovski rocked Hereafter several times. This guy's got a great chin, but I think unless they're in Japan again, I really don't want to see him in the UFC. His skill level at this stage of his career isn't there. In the second round, I was impressed with AV's wrestling. You know, at this stage of the card, he looked like a real talent. He looks like he's going to be a good UFC fighter. Third round, I felt Hereafter did better, but still not enough. Maybe if this went longer, Hereafter would have come back, but you can't, you know, sleep for 2 rounds and then expect to come back and win. It's not how it works, not at this level. So, you know, I think Volkanovski looks good. I think Hereafter looks done. That's what I've got to say about that. Then I picked Mr. Damian Brown to win via decision. Of course, I was wrong. It was a really bad night in terms of my predictions. This was about 3.5 minutes into the first round. Pitchell caught him perfectly with, he was going backwards, Brown was coming in, Pitchell caught him with a left hook, then a right uppercut, TKO. And Pitchell was very intense afterwards, let's say. So that was an interesting one. Then I'd said Dominic Steele would win via decision against debutant Jedi Luke Jumeo. Actually, the Jedi won by decision, but I think the Steele really needs to go away, work on his skills, and if he wants to be a UFC fighter, come back after a few years seasoning. The Jedi is good at counter striking, and he's certainly good on the feet, but as soon as Steele got hold of him, you know, he didn't look like a UFC level fighter. Second round, Jedi managed to drop him, but Steele grabbed on and held on, put him against the fence, and really, when you rock a guy like that, you should be able to finish them off. You know, I think that, if I'm honest as well, in the third round, Steele had impressed against the fence and the referee split them up. But, I mean, really, this was a case of Steele was better on the feet. I'm sorry, Jedi was better on the feet. If Steele took him down, you know, or pushed him up against the fence, then it was Steele's fight. but you know, it really wasn't a great fight. I don't think either of these two guys really belong in the UFC, and I mean, I don't know what you can do with them. Obviously, Jedi's was talking about afterwards that he's got a 4-fight deal, so 3 fights left. I mean, you can either build him up or you can feed him to people. Now, if you build him up, you've got to find some other guys that are pretty weak while he works on his grappling game, let's say. But maybe down in Australia, he's going to become a star. Then we had a guy in John Moraga who really shone. I mean, Ashkan McLaren may be a beast outside of the UFC, but the difference between being a good fighter on the regional scene or outside the UFC and being UFC quality is huge. In the first round, McLaren got caught twice in subs shooting in on Moraga, so he was trying to take him down and Moraga caught him in a guillotine and then rear naked choke, I think he switched it to at the end in the second one. The second round, Moraga was countering him well, rocking him, I think 3 or 4 times. Took him down and controlled him easily. You know, and I think the scorecards came back. One guy had it 30-25, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But, you know, Moraga isn't a guy who's on a 10-fight win streak in the UFC. He's a guy who, you know, has won a few, lost a few. He's fought for a title. But this is the real difference between outside the UFC and inside the UFC. It's just, you know, it's night and day. And I think this card had far too many guys who didn't really belong in the UFC. Then we go back one further. This was originally Wally Alves against Kunemato, but Alves was out and Zach Ottawa came in. You know, Kunemato used to be a skateboarder, and he's probably got a pretty good following in Japan. Again, maybe another one that you only use if you go to Japan again. Ottawa looked a little bit better. He was pretty dominant in the standing. He was switching stances with ease. And Kunemato was trying to take him down but failed every time. Second round, he managed to score a takedown, but Ottawa managed to reverse it pretty easily. And third round, Kuni took him down, kept position pretty well. This was a split decision for Ottawa, but I mean, in my opinion, Ottawa has some good basics and he looks like he could do well, but really you need to be beating a guy like Kunemato handily if you want to be a UFC fighter, and he really didn't do that. Another replacement was supposed to be JJ Eldridge against 187 Nadim Qasim, but this was a late replacement. South Korean rising star, 19-year-old Chamin Jeom, who's 5-0. Actually, she got the call 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately she missed weight. This was a pretty weak effort, you know. This is 2 women who really don't belong in the UFC, with massive holes in their game. They basically stood up all the fight. Jeon looked good early, but you know, I think she tired towards the end of the fight. Eldridge controlled the center of the octagon, but never really looked like she was going to finish. It was 30-27 across the board for Eldridge, but she's not a woman that I think is going to be troubling the top 5 anytime soon. You know, I think the UFC is trying their best with the women's divisions, but they've released fighters that would destroy both of these, and I think the UFC has to try and maintain a semblance of quality if it's serious. You know, if it's serious about wanting to be recognized as the best in the world, they need to maintain a semblance of quality. Overall, you know, there were some good knockouts. There was a few interesting exchanges. Performances that really impressed me was Moraga, you know, and Volkanovski. Is that how I say his name? Let me check. Yeah, Volkanovski. Sorry, Volkanovski. Those two guys impressed me. Brunson impressed me. You know, the main event was good, but again, I think you put either of those two guys in there with Ngannou, they lose. Stipe, they lose. You know, Kudalibe was good, but I'm not a guy who gets very excited about one-punch knockouts. You know, because one-punch knockout means, hey, you caught a guy, but how do you win a fight if you don't get that one-punch knockout? So I'd rather see a guy outpoint someone over 25 minutes than get a one-punch knockout and, you know, be like, oh, I'm so dominant. But, you know, if you didn't watch it, catch the highlights. There's some great stuff there. But I think the dominant thing about this was there was a lot of poor fights tonight, you know, a lot of poor quality fights. And for people watching on free TV, I don't think that's going to encourage them to go out and buy UFC pay-per-views or watch another card. Okay, like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know what you think. And catch you next week for another one.